Slupski!
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slupski. And yes, I'm back. A week after I said I was taking some, extended time off. Well, I promised you I'd be back this week because I said a month ago that on the 19th we'd be announcing our big contest winners. That's the word, contest. I was going to say award, but it's a major award. And so I got to be here on the 19th. I'm not going to let you guys and girls down with that. We've got contest winners to announce today. If this is your first time tuning into the show, welcome aboard. This is the podcast where I've covered every episode of the G.I. Joe cartoons. We've covered all of the comic books and a lot of other retro ephemera. That's primarily what I've done here for 9 years, and I welcome you to look in our archives. It's both hosted on the regular RSS feed, although I think there's a max there, because I've got over 400 some shows, so I think the RSS does limit it at some point. But I do believe everything is available on our Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/Joe and Joe Pod, you can find everything there. If you choose to help support the show, that's great. But I believe all the retro shows at this point are available for just you fun looky-loos who want to come in and give it a listen. Please do give it a listen or support the show. Either way, I appreciate you. I really appreciate all our Patreons out there who have helped support this show. And I think I got some good fun news for you. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about special missions. I skipped special missions when it was time to do special missions because I had bigger plans for special missions. And then all of a sudden, time is what it is. And I realized, holy crap, I never did special missions. So today we're doing special missions. And time for permitting, some of these may show up exclusively or for a while exclusively over on Patreon. I'm not exactly sure. But that's what we're doing today. We're doing special missions number 1. Now, I know I front-loaded this with talk about the contest, and that contest was for the After Action Report. I've got some extra copies. The products from our friends over at After Action Report, including their command files and their silent mission dossier companion. And we were going to give those away. And we had a bunch of you guys reach out to my Gmail address, which is joeonjoepod@gmail.com. And you all were awesome. You're all entered in there. But guess what? You did all win. That's right. And it's not because we only got like 3 people. We got a handful of people that entered the contest. And the reason I'm not actually saying winners right now, but I will say winners some point in April is, spoiler alert, the next episode of this show probably will air first or second week of April. And it is going to be focused on the silent issue, G.I. Joe number 21, to kind of correspond with what's going on in the Energon universe from Skybound. And I was blessed to have a friend of the show, Josh Eggmean, come by, and we discussed his book, the book from the After Action Report team, the G.I. Joe number 21 Silent Companion book. And you know what he did? The reason I share all this roundabout way is he left me a whole box full of giveaways for that book. So I feel like Oprah right now. Everyone who entered is going to win, and there's room for more. So if you're hearing this and you just heard another episode and you're like, oh, I meant to send Joe an email, you still have time, because I now literally have a box full of extra copies of the After Action book, the Silent 21 Companion, which is the really cool. And we get into this with our interview with Josh. It'll be in a couple of weeks, but it's really his breakdown and not just him, is the whole team, Roger, and they investigate the history of that book and how many times it's been referenced, how many times it's been homaged, what were the printings, like what was the origins of it. It's a really, really cool in-depth look at one single book that I didn't think I needed to read 80 pages on, and yet you do. There is absolutely enough content that has been homaged and touched on about G.I. Joe 21 over the years. So I guess I'm saying I'm extending the deadline. If you're hearing this and you haven't already sent me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com with the subject line After Action Report or After Action Contest, either one works, do so and you'll be entered, because I have a stack of books that I want to mail out. So everyone so far, if you're hearing this, you won, and I will announce the actual names of the winners on the actual show. But why jump the gun? Because there's gonna be more winners. So today's the 19th. You have a couple weeks at least. We'll say, let's look at a calendar here. Let's call it the 9th, April 9th. April 9th. You have until like April 8th, April 7th, something like that, to shoot me an email. You can also find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Joe and Joe Pod. Say hello there. I always love hearing from you guys. There's been some fun announcements this week. This morning was the Hasbro G.I. Joe live stream. They haven't done one of those in quite a bit. That snake armor is the bee's knees, man. That thing is epic and amazing. I'm so glad they did it to where a figure can actually fit inside. That is awesome and totally great. I think all the figure reveals were good. Snake Eyes looks great. Even Footloose, static Footloose looked a little bland, but once they posed him up and gave him all his accoutrement, he looked really good. I think my favorite is it's either Blowtorch or Blowtorch. So I think my favorite is Blowtorch, although Darklon actually looked really, really good. I love the divers. They look great with the heavy water. What else was there? Darklon, those guys. I know I ordered all the figures, and boy, was it not cheap. But it was a great reveal. So I hope everyone got them. Also, the previous week, there were a bunch of pre-orders. So there's a lot of stuff popping. Once again, it's been a quiet few months for G.I. Joe. And it's exciting to see them and they did the big announcements about Cold Slither, which, of course, listeners, you go search for Cold Slither Behind the Rock, and you'll find my take on Cold Slither. So today we're talking G.I. Joe Special Missions, and we're doing it Joe on Joe Illustrated. So we're going to go through this sucker page by page, panel by panel. It's not going to be excruciating detail because this book is great on every level. Start with the cover, Mike Zeck cover. It is absolutely gorgeous. It is iconic. The everything about it's awesome. Zeck draws great action. He draws great angry faces. The gunfire, that appears to be Torpedo on the right. It's Wetsuit on the left. The gunfire from their Uzis is awesome. They're climbing up a ship. Like, they just look mid trouble. It's great. This is one of the great book covers that, G.I. Joe fans remember and stands out, primarily I think because it's number one. So it certainly gets a lot of play in that regard, but I do think it really, really pops. So zero complaints about that. I love that you don't know who they're shooting at, just that they're under fire. No, that sinking feeling. Larry Hama, Herb Trimpe, Bob Sharon, Phil Felix, Don Daly and Bob Harris are the editors. Jim Shooter's editor-in-chief. And Sharon was colors, Felix was letters, and Trimpe art. Now, this is from 1986, so about mid-86. Trimpe had stepped away from the G.I. Joe book for a little bit, so this was him returning, and it's like he saved up all of his amazing talent and energy and poured it out in this book, because I love the way this book looks. Let me just get this out of the way. This book's great. I love the idea of special missions. I love the execution of special missions. I think that G.I. Joe of almost any property is perfect for special missions. You've got so many characters and so many different types of stories you could tell with all these characters. Why not branch them off and do that? I know they've tried to do it over the years to somewhat affect whether or not, G.I. Joe can sustain the sales on that kind of a thing. And I know then sometimes, like Larry's gone back and circled in the main series and done, special missions issues that kind of cover all time frame. I think these should be a regular built-in function of the main comic book. I really, really do. Whether or not it can sustain its own series or not, I don't know, but at least 2-3 times a year, I absolutely think they should make this a regular thing where they just branch off, give the main, if it has to be in the main storyline, give the main story a little bit of a breather and tell these one-off special missions that feature the unknown Joes, so to speak. Because it's so much fun. It's a lot of fun. In this case, we get to feature Joes that we're not getting spotlight, and we get a lot of time with the Oktober Guard, which is great. I think it works. I think the premise works. You know, what, it ran for 28 issues, something like that. So I'm on board. Opens somewhere in the Baltic Sea. There is a Swedish trawler, the Christina. There's going to be a lot of weird Russian names, by the way, in this. Out of, I imagine this is somewhere in Sweden, Karlskrona. I don't know where that is. But the ship is full of herring and mackerel. And the Oktober Guard are flying overhead in one of their giant Russian gunships. And they're not fooled by anything. They say the only fish the Christina is interested in are built by General Dynamics at the Groton shipyards. So the next page, we've got Torpedo looking through some binoculars, and Cutter, he's steering the ship, and they make positive ID on Dinah and Colonel Brekov. And here we get two of the greatest panels in any G.I. Joe comic book ever, because they feature Polly. Shipwreck cooking up, and it's a little bit of a narrative lifting for us. He says, you know, first day out in our undercover cruise, and we get buzzed by the Russian equivalent of the G.I. Joe team. You know, like that's them for the readers to make sure we understand who the Oktober Guard are. And we get Polly talking. He gives you a squawk. You know, shipwreck was a sailor, a salty dog was he, and the worstest cook that ever sailed upon the briny sea. Squawk. That's all I need. That's all I need. I need more Shipwreck, and I need more Polly. They're great. I'm an old school Shipwreck fan. I think Polly's great. I love the cartoon version of him. I don't think he was used enough in the Hamaverse, so to speak. So to see him kind of feature here is awesome, and to see Polly and really squawking is great. Like, I love it. So the Joes are covering up a tarp, and we get a little close up of Brekov in the helicopter. What he pulls here is absolutely amazing, but I think it's a little bit of a testament to how good that all these people are, how professional everyone is. Before we go further, though, Trimpy is just a master storyteller, and he is at the top of his game. He is choosing the right camera angles and the right scenes to bounce around, even giving us a moment for a close-up of Polly singing. And we absolutely follow the action of, this helicopter circling this boat, the guy's pulling the tarp over, and then we cut back into, like, it's actually a masterclass in just basic comic book storytelling that is seemingly a lost art these days. So we move on to the next page, and this is the feat that I believe that's Brekov identifies. He identifies Deep Six, the diving specialist of the G.I. Joe team. Of all people, he identifies Deep Six, who is normally covered up in the giant spacesuit, right? And Deep Six currently has a hat on, and he's not wearing the deep diving suit. You know, this look deep. You guys know the one I'm talking about. He's not wearing that suit. He has a wool cap covering his hair, so it's not even, you can't see his hair color. And just by his face, Brekov identifies him as like, oh, that's Deep Six. I would get, hey, that's Shipwreck. I would maybe, hey, that's Torpedo, because Torp's been around a while. Maybe even Cutter. You know, he's got the distinctive mustache. Maybe he still has keep his Boston hat on, right? But to have him identify Deep Six, of all people, is either wildly ridiculous or wildly competent on the part of Colonel Brekov. It depends on how you want to no-prize that one. But I love it. So what this really does, though, for the readers from a narrative point, and to make it more what we do here on Joe and Joe Illustrated, which kind of break down the book, is it dispenses with any pretense of cover. It gets right to it. It knows this. Larry knows, this book knows that it's only got 22 pages to tell kind of an intricate story / retelling of Hunt for Red October. And if it wasted time on them being fooled and then having to go, oh my gosh, you're really the Joes the whole time. That's like it's a totally acceptable story beat. But I think that's also maybe a trope, it's really a trope to have the bad guys fooled by your undercover thing. I think it is a more interesting choice to have nobody fooled by anything in this whole story, as we will soon see. Because Brekov is right away saying that the Joes are there on a covert rescue and retrieval mission. The rumors about an American submarine being disabled on the bottom of the Baltic must be true. The other great piece of narrative / first comic book is someone's first for every time is we see that on Brekov's lap, he has actually a dossier of all the Joes, like a printed out book. So one, we do see that he's comparing faces to faces that they have, pre-built in Russian. But we have him, the picture in the book is Deep Six in his Deep Six uniform. So for you toy readers out there, for all you young kids out there, and every book someone's first, they may not recognize the name Deep Six. They may not exactly twig onto who that is. So this is really a great way of saying, yeah, no, this is what this guy normally looks like, but it'd be kind of silly to have him in that uniform now. So we're, shorthanding it for you. So that's super smart. It's a super quick way to just, be detailed about the book you're telling. Coming off of last week's G.I. Joe 3D annual, where they literally didn't name one of the Joes. Was it 11 pages? We didn't even get a name for one of the Joes. So this is awesome. And then, because action never stops, Dinah spots 3 intruder aircraft. Now, we don't know who they are yet at this point. So could they be, you easily could expect that they're like Joe aircraft heading into, fight Colonel Brekov, right? Oh no. It is 3 Fang helicopters flying over the Baltic Sea, and they have got to be so cold. Baroness is flying one without a mask. At least Firefly. Is Firefly? I know Firefly is later in this. Is he one of these guys, though? No, he's not. I don't think he is. But at least the other troopers have, like, a face mask. Baroness is flying this thing with no headgear. She has got to be freezing. But it's the Baroness flying overhead, and she is in full, even though this issue came out, in 86, so it was right around issue 50, 51, 52 of G.I. Joe. She is totally way back in that revolutionary Baroness from the first 20 issues of the series. Talking about the geriatric gnomes of Moscow think they can beat Cobra to the punch. Like, she's totally a true believer Baroness in this, both visually and verbally, the way Larry portrays her. And I'm here for it. I love that version of Baroness. I think that version is infinitely amazing. It very much like the, wasn't she modeled after a little Patty Hearst, I think was going on there. I think I feel like we read that somewhere, that he modeled a little bit of her on that. So these Fangs shoot missiles, and they're shooting not at the boat, they're shooting at the Oktober Guard in their helicopter. So the Oktober Guard have to make a quick little getaway. They pop their chaff and they run. Meanwhile, Shipwreck comes on board to tell the guys that, hey, dinner's ready. Get another little poly shot, and we see in the distance these 4 helicopters are having a little dogfight in the sky, and it's fun. We get to see how capable the Oktober Guard are. Really good storytelling. We've got a large, so it's a 3/4 tall skyscraper shot where we get all 3 of the Fangs lined up in a row. So that tells us kind of that the way this shot is, we see the Baroness, then behind her another Fang, then behind it another Fang. It places them in space for us, that they're attacking in a line. And then we cut to Dana telling the Colonel to arm the chin turret, and she's actually piloting the helicopter, and she's letting one of those Fangs slide into his kill zone. And then the next shot we get, that Fang gets literally chopped in half. I'm assuming that that pilot dies. Hits the drink, And while they're doing that, though, one of the other fangs hits the helicopter. But not before, or at least right after, they then take out the third fang. So the Baroness is still alive and kicking, but it's one-on-one. We got a little dogfight in the sky. They pass each other. Lots of missiles flying, lots of guns blazing. The Oktober Guard are damaged, so they have to go home, which we find out later is a tanker in the ocean a little distance away. It's it's like a trawler tanker, big Russian boat. And the Fang with Baroness, she limps away the other direction. So even though they both know those are the Joes, those two in the sky know that they're going to have to beat one or the other in order to get the trophy, which they think is a sunken submarine that the Joes are there for. So the Joes are just sitting back watching this whole thing. In fact, most of this, the Joes are very passive, and I love that for them. Like, it's great because it's something different, It's their plan that comes to fruition in this issue without spoiling anything. It's not necessarily them, being men of action. It's them being smarter than the average man of action. And so while they limp away, Deep Six says it's time for him to suit up. So now he's in his regular Deep Six outfit, and they jump into the Shark. The Shark is what was under that tarp earlier. This is also a cool little spotlight on the Shark, which would have been a new toy at the time. And they specifically say that the commo cable is free and clear, all voice and video communications on a secure wire. So they make sure to tell us that this communications cable, which is going to be linked up and hooked up to the Shark, is how they're going to be communicating with them. They say it, they move on. Nothing to really dwell on. It's sharp. Shark goes down. So 10 nautical miles to the south, we get the Hind, the Oktober Guard limping back towards the deck, and now we've got Stormovik, Horror Show, Schrag. We all know them from the Oktober Guard, and this new guy. I don't believe we've seen him before. Captain Bulgakov. He's captaining the boat, and he says, "I am thinking, Schrag, that adventurous aggression is counter to party doctrine." So he actually course corrects what these guys are saying about talking about that they got, how exciting it is that there was a firefight, all the missiles were loosed, whatever these guys were up to must have been exciting, and the Bulgakov is reminding them, like, button up, like, we're Russian soldiers, like, there's nothing to be excited about, we're here to do a job. So the helicopter crashes. They actually landed Diana. Nice landing, Diana. I don't have to file that negative report on you to the KGB now, which is crazy. Like, what it must be to live under that kind of like, do your job. Like, we're not gonna ranch. Like, if something happens, the Joe's attacked, and you did your best, you survived, and you get rattled out to the KGB. That's nuts. Anyway, we get a little reference here for where this takes place in time. This is after the G.I. Joe yearbook number 2. Because we've got Colonel Brekov saying he's just gotten rid of that burning cockpit smell on his uniform from that Afghanistan debacle. That was in yearbook 2. And this page does what a lot of this issue actually does, which I kind of like, is just there's a lot of heavy lifting text explaining why and how people are doing things, but I don't mind it. Like, that's not a complaint or a criticism. It's really setting up the intricacy to get what could be a complicated multi-issue story out in one. And I think that is an art that is lost on modern comics. Like, this would be at least a 2-issue adventure if this came out today. And I appreciate that they're able to get it in one. And how do you do that? You just give a little exposition, where, Colonel Brekov says, the Americans have lost a sub in the Baltic. This is our pond. They're not supposed to be here. with your comprehensive knowledge, we can salvage that sub and advance our underwater capabilities. All we have to do is, and he reiterates, oh, we just have to neutralize the crack G.I. Joe team, who are ensconced on a Swedish vessel, flying Swedish colors and obviously carrying Swedish papers. Swedes are still upset about our sub that ran aground in their waters. And he explains he's the harbor master of Kaliningrad. He's got responsibilities. That's why he was sent along. And Brekov here sets up a little bit of foreshadowing here. He says, you are too cautious. That's why you never got promoted to admiral. So there's, he's both laying the tracks for some of the motivations that come up later, but also just doing a lot of expositional heavy lifting, but getting it done well and in character and without dumbing it down. And I appreciate that. So now we have to cut to the Fangs and how are they surviving? The Baroness, her Fang is just, blowing smoke everywhere. They're now 10 nautical miles to the north of the Christina. So remember the Russians were south. Now she's north. And she calls into this is where Firefly comes into play. She radios to Firefly, who's on a hydrofoil, a moray. Says stand by with the eels for rescue. She's going to have to ditch the Fang in the ocean, which she does. Fang's one of the all-time toys, and it looks great on paper, but then things like open air cockpit and having to ditch while that rotor is flying, 2 feet above your head is always funny and only doable on a comic page. I would love to see them try to do a Fang in real life like this. I can't even imagine they would even try. They would have to put a canopy on that thing. Anyway, so Firefly comes by and they hydrofoil and they drag the Baroness on board. And she basically says the same thing the Russian said is, we got to hold both of them at bay until a Cobra salvage sub can sail there. And Cobra can get the components and sell the secrets to the highest bidder, etc. So now we know what Cobra's up to. Meanwhile, over at the Christina, they're radioing down to the Shark. And in pretty much all of the images over the next couple pages, well, it's important on the next page, but we keep seeing that telecommunication line that's connected to the Shark and to the ship, which is important. And we see that Deep Six says, I'm initiating the search procedure, and it says, will commence video transmission upon making contact with the target. And as they're saying that, the Oktober Guard ship boat catches up to him, comes from 10 nautical miles away. It's the frigate Udalov or Udaloy. I'm not sure how that's pronounced. If the Y is silent, or I'm sorry, if the Y is a V, but Udaloy. You're in restricted Soviet naval operation zone. Change course, etc. Cutter is absolutely hilarious. He says no smorgasbord Saab turbo. He's bluffing them. And it says, Torpedo says, Deep Six still hasn't started his video transmission, which is a really interesting way to phrase that. And then we're looking at the TV screen, and he says, wait a minute, it's on. So now on the TV screen, there is a U.S. submarine that has been, the side of it has been blown out, decompressed, and it's leaking various things and oils and bubbles and things like that. And on the opposite side of the Udaloy, Dinah and Horror Show are diving, and they're going underwater, and they're going to intercept that commo cable between Christina and the Shark, and they're going to splice into the cable and release a telecommunication buoy, so they're going to be able to intercept all the messages and images that Deep Six is sending to the ship. Now, this is key. And Horror Show, meanwhile, Dinah is... she's going to surface and kind of, they say, harass the hydrofoil. So she's going to give the hydrofoil something to pay attention to. And Horror Show is going to reconnoiter the Shark. So now the Cobra hydrofoil is caught up. They're now giving an ahoy. Great small panel close-ups with enough wide shots to give space. We do a nice vertical sky shot of the water to give us reset our image of what's happening here. And we see the Joes on their Swedish boat right in the middle, parked with the two Cobra, with the Cobra ship and the Russian ship, circling they appear to be going in a counterclockwise fashion. And so that really sets up in one panel, kind of gives us what's happening in this. And we can just see them. They're just going to keep circling on opposite sides of the Joe's ship. And Baroness, she chimes in with we know who you are. Like, we're not playing around here. Let's call a temporary truce and unite against the Russians. Now, while that's happening, she tells Firefly to deploy 2 eels to buoy the Russian frigate. So the Russians are boarding the Joes and harassing the Cobras. Meanwhile, the Cobras are sending eels to harass the Russians. Over on the Russian ship, and this is what I mean, like, they barely deal with the Joes in this mission. This is all Russians and Cobra. They're picking up the transmission from the cable splice, and we see its visual image of a Los Angeles class attack sub disabled on the seabed. Sound probes confirm they can even hear the reactor popping. That'd be, I believe, the nuclear reactor giving off radiation. And most systems are shut down. They're conserving power and air, so they think that there are survivors on board. The eels are on board, which these eels, Herb Trimpe draws these eels like a master. These eels look amazing. The coloring on them, and all the coloring in this whole book, has a little green hue to it. And I like it for what it gives the book. Obviously, eels are traditionally, gray, but it gives with the whole book being on the ocean, there's going to be a lot of, it could easily be a wash in blue, right? So they kind of go for this, the whole book does, this kind of an aquamarine green tint to most of the coloring, which I think really, really works because it gives it this washed out ocean kelp kind of feel to it. The result, though, is that the eels are kind of in green uniforms, but they look great. Like, they don't look wrong. It's not like they look like they've been colored wrong. They just look like it's almost like it's just the area is just a wash reflecting the colors of the of the ocean, of the sky, of fill in the blank. Their weapons are ready, and Baroness gives the order to neutralize the frigate's armaments. And they drop some satchel charges, and they destroy the guns, the main cannons, on the Russian frigate. So the main turret has been destroyed. Who's that? It's not Horror. Well, he tells Shreg to cover him, so that must mean that is Stormovic. So Stormovic says, cover me, Shreg. He's going to go out there and see who they are. So they start shooting up their own boat, trying to get these eels. They still have to take out the missile launchers on the Russian boat. And Baroness says 2 Cobra eels are worth a company of Soviet Marines. And at that moment, Dinah is climbing up behind her, but she said, "But not the Oktober Guard, Baroness." So she and drops a grenade in the cockpit. For the record, I mean, should have killed Firefly. This is a great explosion. Firefly is 100% caught in the blast. He is either laying on the surface of the boat in the next panel, or he's crawling out of the cockpit of the hydrofoil in the next panel. But he's hurt, and he should be hurt because she threw a grenade into the cockpit of the hydrofoil, if you could picture that. And the Baroness kicks her off the boat, back into the water. Firefly's alive here because he actually says the grenade knocked out our controls. The wheels and the throttle are frozen. So picture it like he jumped out of the way of the grenade, but the grenade still ruined the controls of the boat. But they are headed directly towards I believe it's the Russian ship because it's smoking in a couple areas. I don't believe they're heading towards the Joes. So over on the Christina, the cutter gives a signal to Torp and Wetsuit to suit up and hit the drink. And this is the first we hear of this. Wetsuit says skyhooks on schedule with a question mark. And Cutter says affirmative. So now you're reading this and what skyhook are they talking about? in the years since this book came out, we've seen the skyhook used in things like Batman Begins, when he or was it Dark Knight? No, it was Dark Knight when he hooks the financier and brings him from Hong Kong back to, where he grabs the guy with the airplane. But we've seen the skyhook in motion. I don't know if in 1986 a lot of readers were familiar with what a skyhook was. So this is pretty cool and neat that he just says it, and we're going to see it later in action. I don't know that readers would have been really familiar with what that is. And then we go back underwater to check on Horror Show, which we know he was headed towards the shark. And we don't understand what this is, but he gets to the shark. He opens the cockpit, and there's no one in it. So Wetsuit's not in the cockpit. Or I'm sorry, Deep Six isn't in the cockpit. But there is a little VCR playing, and it's hooked up, and it says Professional VCR. When I first read this, I was like, is he recording stuff? And I think you're supposed to think that could be what it is. Like, is he recording the images? But as Horror Shows is also questioning what is going on, he gets hit in the head with a wrench from Deep Six. Deep Six, by the way, shown in the most motion he's ever been shown in that suit, which we all know the figure was immobile because it floated. So the hydrofoil is coming directly at the Russian boat. They're not going to be able to turn away. That colonel is like, prepare to be boarded because they're going to hit us. And Firefly and Baroness quickly ascertain that the only way they're actually going to live is to board that Russian boat and take it over, because their ship is kerplunked. Like, they're not going to be able to survive. And Baroness reminds them that it's happened before, because the Russians haven't trusted sailors with small arms since Potemkin, which is in 1905, the crew of the Russian battleship Potemkin mutinied in support of the striking workers of Odessa. So apparently they can't carry firearms. So as long as they get on board, they can shoot, punch, beat their way out of it. And we know Firefly, he's a bad dude. So they're already screaming for Cobra. Firefly screams for personal survival and the promise of riches, which, let's be real, man, that is a quick moment of character that most writers wouldn't do. Larry not only has fun with it, but also shows that at their heart, Cobra are mercenaries, at least Firefly is. The Baroness is not. The Baroness believes in Cobra. So I love it. So now we got a firefight on board. Shreg and Stormovic are shooting. We get some explanations that the Cobra eels, they're on the high ground. They're caught in a crossfire, but the eels want to get to the bridge. And that the colonel is keep holding them off. I'm depending on you to keep the Cobras from winning for reasons you would find quite surprising. So that's a little foreshadowing as well. The eels are tossing grenades. And this is like old-fashioned G.I. Joe fight choreography, which Trimpe is really, really good at. It's very easy to track what's going on. We've been told the eels have the high ground. We now see Dinah. She climbs back on board. She left the hydrofoil. She reaches their ship. And she is a sniper, whether we know that or not, but she says, let's see if this plastic case for her Dragunov is really watertight. But we know that Dinah is the sniper of the team. So she pulls her rifle out and she murders those fools. Those eels are dead. She shoots them from behind. The one may be alive, but I feel like the one on the left is totally dead. So she takes care of the eels. On the other side of the Udalov are the Joes. So the Joes are doing what those two other boats did, which is send troops over and board one of the other ships. And we got Torpedo in his traditional torpedo suit. And that Colonel Bulgakov, he says, Mr. Torpedo and Mr. we should say it like this. Mr. Torpedo and Mr. Wetsuit, everything on schedule? That's a terrible Sean Connery. Nuclear weapons don't respond well to bullets. To the second, time to strap on your harness. And you're thinking, what harness, Colonel Bulgakov? Back to the action. And this, storytelling-wise, very smart. You dip in, dip out. One panel caught us up with what the Joes were doing and caught us up with the main thrust of what's happening on this. But then we get back to the action. Strangely, I got I'm reminded of the pacing of a Fast and the Furious kind of movie. Literally, the one where they were stealing the submarine. Like, that was a lot going on, a lot of different places, and they would cut into the guys in the control booth, cut into the people on the ice, cut into this, cut into that, and you just catch up with people for a moment, show what they're doing, and then you get back to the action, which is what people paid for. So Baroness knows that there's a Cobra sub heading towards them to save them. And so now we get a Cobra sub surface, and the Cobra sub is fully healthy and intact, and we see that it's Destro on it. And he's, shouting, I'm assuming with some kind of voice amplification, sees hostilities immediately. There is no downed American submarine. This was all a prefabrication perpetrated by the Joe team. The Russians are saying that he's lying. And Brekov says, let's hear him out. And Destro explains that us, also never really saw the sub. The video image was a pre-recorded tape of a model in a fish tank. That the Joes expected the Russians to splice into their line. The sound signature was generated by a sonic simulator torpedo that's used for target practice, which we see Destro's eels bringing to the surface as he's explaining this. And what was the purpose of the charade? And on the top of the ship, the highest level, I don't know, the bow, the stern, the whatever, Destro points out that he's the reason, he being the colonel. Captain Bulgakov. And this is where we veer heavily into the Hunt for Red October territory, ladies and gentlemen. Hunt for Red October had been published in 1984. I promise you, Larry and whoever cooked up this plot had read that book and loved it, because it's a great book, don't get me wrong, and a great movie. The movie had not yet come out, but the book 100% was a bestseller by that point. And we see Bulgakov yelling that old party hardliners Bulgakov turns out to be a defector. My wife was a loyal party member too. Her grandfather was a hero of the October Revolution, and her father lost both his legs at Stalingrad. The party was her life, but she was a Jew. In her naivete, she could not believe that her beloved party would hold her heritage against him, me, Bulgakov. She loved me so much, you see. And I loved her more than a sailor loves the sea. When she realized that the husband of a Jew could never become an admiral, she stopped wanting to live. She died in January when the port of Kaliningrad is covered with ice as white as a winding sheet. And with her died my loyalty to the party. That is literally the inspiration for Sean Connery to be defecting in Hunt for Red October. It's awesome. It's great. And we see the Joes are coming. Wild Bill's coming over with Hawk riding shotgun in a C-130 as Bulgakov is giving that speech. Again, this is really, really great storytelling. Small in the distance, over his shoulder, we see a plane. Close up on Bulgakov's face, because his face is now carrying the emotion and he's the focus. But you see over his shoulder, the plane gets a little bigger. Now the camera moves past Bulgakov and focuses on the plane. And then it's just a straight up close up of the plane heading right towards a balloon that happens to be attached to Bulgakov's torso. And it's that skyhook thing where a plane flies low and grabs the floating balloon and whatever the cargo is, rips it right off the ground. And the Joes needed the Oktober Guard to bring him in the middle of the Baltic to extract him and defect. They needed a Cobra to cause a diversion, so while they effected that extraction, that's why we were both leaked information about the supposed sub. And we see that it's Wild Bill and Hawk on board, and it's old school Hawk, not General Hawk. He's in his old school togs. He says, that's what I call a perfect mission, Wild Bill. They welcome him aboard. That Stabo, the stabilized body extraction rig, can be a little jolting. He says he found the experience quite uplifting. It looks like that's Roadblock, and I want to say that's Airborne based on the helmet. That's kind of cool that they went to the trouble of drawing actually Airborne. They're shooting at the plane. Destro yells them they're idiots. They were out of range and stuff. So this is the only part. And so it works. They defected. And now the Joes are on this Swedish ship. They still have a horror show captive because Deep Six hit him with a wrench underwater. They're winching the shark back on board, and they kick Horror Show off the boat. They just boot him in the water because he's got his scuba gear on. He'll live. It's very funny. Shipwreck does. He's got a pistol on him, kicks him, throws him back in, and he says, "This calls for a nice frosty round of Yojo Cola." And they all celebrate. And then on the Utiloi, the Baroness says, "You dare not shoot us, Brekov. Your main turret is knocked out. Like Destro would kill you if you hurt us." So it's a whole standoff going on. So they jump in the water. And this is from Brekov. He says, "We don't have to be civil about you getting you back over to the boat." So he kicks them into the water, Firefly and the Baroness. So basically, everyone's in a standoff to get away clean. The Russians don't have any armament anymore. Destro just wants the Baroness back. He knows they lost. He's smart enough to know they lost. And the Joes are just going to scoot away. So that's great. And that's like everything I look for in a... just a one and done G.I. Joe adventure. Like, really, I mean it. This is Special Missions is great. That's all we need. We get a tease for next issue that we're getting Clutch and Breaker taking on a Doomsday Machine in Words of Honor. That's exciting. So yeah, man. I mean, Special Missions is great. It's dope. I hope that some form of the current comic books kind of get back to this a little bit, and it's not a critique on the current state of the comics, but more of like, this is so fun. This is so much fun. This is something that should happen. Maybe a 6-issue miniseries every year that just tells 6 standalone books, that runs. So maybe it's not an ongoing series. It's just, Special Missions 2025 and you get 6 issues, and Special Missions 2026 or something like that. I don't know what the format is, but there's such a rich world of G.I. Joe and their enemies and Cobras, and there's just so many places that authors can flesh that out. I really, really hope that they get back to doing more of that. It's great, though. I love doing it. Thank you all so much for listening. We will see you soon. I'll be back on definitely by April 9th for our silent issue episode talking about winners. If you wanna be a winner, I got a whole box full of Action Report companions over here. So just send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com with After Action Report or After Action Contest in the subject line. We'll get you hooked in. So far, literally everyone's won because I now have a plethora of winning prizes. So now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.